was obscure to me because I didn't think that my child would be able to even consider applying, less making it in. For me, it was the fear of the unknown, that was even a possibility.
Mr. Lee came about in independent school, and said the possibility of people like me having the kids in that kind of school, that gives me like, oh my God, I can't believe that. I was really scared. I told him, I said, you know what, I don't think I can. I know I can afford this.
Self-reliance, self-respect. I mean, there's so many different things that you learn in addition to the education that you're afforded.
A drop in the ocean of what I'm giving.
For me, having that assistance and that support was priceless. I didn't even know where, who I would talk to, what the process, what the expectations were.
So applying to independent school, all the processing seems so hectic for me. Someone is able to lead you to the path.
Without that support, without that aid, without that constant positive supervising throughout the process, we wouldn't have done it.
For me, right now that my daughter is in a boarding school, the counselor and the admission advisor actually, he lives the life of a boarding school. So it's just like home away from home.
So the first year was really the year of discovery. Her second year was definitely a year of maturity. She is not the same person that I knew when I dropped her off on year one, day one. My daughter up to this point has had the opportunity to learn a third language, Spanish, English, and now Mandarin. She's doing wonderful, looking forward to an opportunity of a lifetime, a trip to China. It's such a competitive opportunity to get into one of these schools. The application process, the financial aid, the understanding, the expectation, the meetings, the essay writings, all of these processes need support and someone that is knowledgeable, that is committed, that is persistent, that is just supportive in so many ways. And truly, 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 Mr. Lee has been that for us and our family. This is a life opportunity. It's not just high school, it is beyond.
Look on your frostbite. Stiff, cold, and blue. Nice when I spit. Don't press unless looking for the sunroof option. David Koresh.
All right. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Let me press record here and get myself going. Konnichiwa. Welcome to the Marshall Maze. So before we begin, two things. One of which we had a short second season because of COVID. Well, mainly because of COVID and dealing with COVID. So we ended up ending our season early. Also, if you haven't watched it on YouTube, you should. An offshoot of the Marshall Maze is the Marshall Maze Presents Modern Combatives. We ended season 1 with an episode of yours truly. Yeah, that was a hard one talking about myself. And this season coming, we have a lot of greats, so look forward to that. If you haven't watched it, watch it. You can catch us on YouTube. All right, so our guest today is a returning guest. In fact, he piloted our first episode. He's the author of Insight 101, The Way of Big Power, Martial Advice for Training, The UNA Way, Randy B. Haskins. Let me make that correction one more time because I always say UNA. It's UA. UA Way. I get so embarrassed when I mess it up like that, man. I'm doing it like live too, and Hey, brother, how are you doing, man? Thanks for being on Marshall Maze.
Good. Thank you for having me.
All right. So before we get into our topic of discussion, though, this was the second thing. Folks, we've often heard that maxim to empty the cup in the martial community. We've all heard it, especially for martial artists. And yet, I found that folk in the martial community rarely apply that. So, with episodes coming up, past episodes, but more importantly, these kinds of episodes, especially with the topic we're going to talk about right now, today, I feel you should empty the cup first before you cast judgment. Make sure that, you analyze what's being talked about here, and then put it to the process. And with that, Haskins Sensei, what are we talking about today, sir? What's our topic?
We're going to discuss self-protection / self-defense and most people's interpretation of that. Self-protection slash self-defense is a situation to be addressed with whatever tool you are going to use in that martial system is the tool.
So wait a minute, hold up. What I hear you saying is, so if I'm a trained martial artist, well, I'm a MMA guy, right? Or I'm a seasoned judoka, because I like using judoka. You're saying that even though I might have gotten the gold in the Olympics or something like that, when it comes to how I navigate in the real world, I might find myself in a bad way?
Absolutely.
Okay, no, elaborate, sir.
Well, the way people approach it, I'm going to put it in a visual term. Let's say I had a knife sitting here on this table. People would call that knife self-defense because it's a knife and you can stab someone with it.
Okay.
But all it is a tool that you could use to possibly defend yourself, but it's not self-defense. Self-protection is how you set up your life in such a way where violence misses you. Violence, the possibility of having to go to court for defending yourself, the monetary strife that comes from the act of having to defend yourself, the mental anguish that comes from having to defend yourself, that is self-protection. How you set up your life in such a way where all that isn't a problem for you.
Okay.
If you fail at self-protection, then you enter the self-defense realm where you have to physically protect yourself.
So what exactly is the misunderstanding that you find that it's something like karate, judo, BJJ, whatever you want, MMA, kind of miss that? Because I almost feel like that's still a byproduct that comes from the training that you receive in those, whether it be sport or combative martial art.
Well, people believe that just because they take or took karate or judo or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or whatever system or respective style of system they study, that they automatically know how to defend themselves or protect themselves. And nothing could be farther from the truth. Just because you went to a school, a martial arts dojo, and did some techniques physically doesn't mean you understand how to protect yourself. I've been to a lot of self-defense, self-protection courses, and all I've witnessed is them teaching physical techniques that the average person will never be able to use. And with no information on violence, no information on habitual acts of physical violence, no information on laws, no information on anything that has to do with self-protection or self-defense. You take, say, some young woman who's done nothing but raise children her whole life, and I didn't mean that in a condescending way, but what I'm saying is no real athletic endeavors, but raising children and homemaking and doing those important things, and teaching them a knee strike or a knee kick or something like that. Something that seasoned martial artist practices for years. For years.
No, actually, readjust your mic a little bit though, so you can kind of hear yourself
right.
too. Yes, there you go.
So techniques that seasoned martial artist has been practicing for years, for decades, and they're still practicing it because they're still not confident in it to the point. In an hour course, 2-hour course, this young woman is supposed to be able to use it in time of need. It's things like that that just don't make any sense.
Well, yeah.
So self-protection, again, like I said, is what someone does or how they do it where violence just misses them. They set up their life in such a way. Any place I've ever been, when I park my car, I back into a parking space or into my driveway. I've never driven straight into my driveway. I always back in. That way, if I happen to go outside and I get in my vehicle and somebody's standing in front of my driveway, in front of my car looking at me, I don't got to do a 9-point turn to get out of my driveway. All I got to do is just drive straight out. Anytime I go to the movie theater, during my second marriage, any marriage I had 2 marriages. Anybody, my kids, my wife, we would go to the movies. I'd buy tickets. My wife would go into the theater that we're going in and look in. And she'd look up. If the back row was full and say every other row was empty, she knows I'm not going in there because nobody sits behind me. So I never leave my house without my firearm. Tell you why. One day I did, and I got approached by a prisoner who had just got released and had issues with anybody with a badge. He saw me at a Walgreens on Sumner Ave in Springfield, and if I didn't back in, if I didn't check my area, you know,
it could have been a whole different scenario.
A whole different scenario. So self-protection. It's how you set up your life in such a way where violence dismisses you. That's the avoidance stage. It's just how you live your life.
Okay.
You know, understanding these things.
I mean, these are things that we all take for granted and stuff. You know? And this is something that typically doesn't get talked about in most schools.
Most people. I went to self-defense courses, self-protection courses, where all they did, and I went to different dojos I talked to different instructors, martial arts instructors, and I talked to them about this stuff, and they're like, well, what are you talking about? Like, I'm speaking French to them. They have no idea what I'm talking about. So that tells me that they don't understand self-protection. Just because you took a fighting art or some type of martial art doesn't mean you understand self-protection. So when you see it written on their window, we teach self-defense. But do they though? So self-defense, right? That's the next phase. That is a situation that possibly happens to one who totally neglected the self-protection aspect. If it went to the self-defense phase, you failed at self-protection. All right, so let's get into self-defense. The important aspects of entering into that realm, self-defense, you have no choice. Let's just say you avoid it at all costs, but it found you anyway. Now, you better know the laws of whatever area, state, host country, wherever you are, you have to understand those laws.
Yeah.
All right?
No knock warrants.
You have to understand the use of the tools that you choose. Understand how to use those tools, right? And then understanding the context in which you were trained. So, what do I mean by context? Let's say I have a firearm right here. All right, so a firearm is a deadly weapon. Okay, but I could use that deadly weapon for target shooting or sport shooting. I can use it to hunt. I can use it for self-protection, self-defense, right? For self-defense. The context or the principles that govern its use for target shooting are not the same that govern its use for self-protection, self-defense.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? So let's replace the deadly weapon of a firearm with the deadly weapon of judo or, say, karate or whatever. The principles that govern this deadly weapon's use for sport don't necessarily apply to self-defense.
Yes.
And people need to understand that. One such situation was when Anthony Smith, a UFC fighter, got into an altercation with a gentleman that broke into his house. He tried everything to knock this guy out, to do this, do that, do this, do that, and nothing worked. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And that taught him a valuable lesson about, fighting in the ring under rules and all this other stuff. It's totally different.
Oh, I'll do you one better. There's the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor who, outside of a nightclub in the night, figured to intervene in a fight, with the best of intentions and ended up stabbed to death.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're looking to a fight, and again, the things that govern fighting in the ring or on a mat are very much different in real life.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So understanding the context of how you were trained, very important. Being able to discern what parts are valid for self-protection, self-defense, very important. And understanding the basic universal principle of technique, interpretation, and pragmatic usage allow you to discern what movements and or skills are self-defense oriented as opposed to sport oriented. And the basic universal principle of technique, interpretation, and pragmatic usage is that code that I gave you that says, once again, the first action or combination of action you execute should have the ability and or probability of neutralizing the opponent's ability to continue to fight or immobilize the opponent entirely. Very, very important. And understanding the use of force continuum.
Yes.
The use of force is not just a law enforcement thing. It's for anyone. It's for civilian alike. It's very important that you understand how not to go above. You understand?
I'm loving that you're bringing this up because, yes, that's very, very important. I'd like for you to drive that point home again, sir. The use of force, please.
Excessive force is very real. If you stop the threat, if you end the threat, you have to stop. It's very important. You can't continue on. Somebody attacks you with a knife, you disarm the person, let's just say. You can't now stab them 67 times because they pulled a knife on you after you disarmed them. That's excessive force. So understanding the use of force is very important in civilian and law enforcement life. Very important.
The full episode can be heard on the Marshall Mays podcast. That can be found anywhere you listen to your popular podcast. And now, a preview of the Marshall Mays Modern Combatives Season 2. And once again, thanks for watching.
My brother called upon me, and when he called upon the whole clan, it was over 1,000 deep.
We had to deal with, the drug dealers.
They were taking over buildings.
Yeah, the drugs were so bad at this point that even the police couldn't do anything.
Some of the biggest drug lords, the Fat Cats, the Supremes.
With drugs and violence growing out of control, people turned to the pillars of their community.
The people in the community became very afraid. So they basically came to me and asked, do I know of anything or anybody to be able to help?
This is a story about martial artists stepping up to defend their community.
SWAM, Swam, strong, wise, achieving mind, strength, wisdom, alert mind.
A Marshall Mays Special Edition.